If you had asked me what leadership looked like when I was younger, I probably would have pointed at a color-coded spreadsheet, a polished quarterly report, or some manager standing beside a glass conference room pretending exhaustion made him important. Back then, I thought leadership meant working hard enough that eventually someone would notice. I was wrong. They noticed. They just never intended to reward me for it. My name is Suzanne Newton. I'm 29 years old, raised in a Rust Belt town where ambition looked like overtime pay and surviving winter without your car breaking down. My father spent 20 years inside a steel plant until his knees gave out before he turned 50. My mother worked reception at a dentist's office and still somehow managed to make breakfast for 3 kids every morning like she was running a military operation with coffee and pure stubbornness. So no, I didn't grow up expecting opportunity to arrive wrapped in gold paper. I learned how to become useful, quietly useful. I was good at systems, good at patterns, good at fixing things nobody else even noticed were broken until they exploded in someone important's face. College took me longer than it should have. Night classes, weekend shifts, one semester where I had mono, and a supervisor who told me, "Everybody's tired, Suzanne." Eventually, I landed at Midline Solutions, a mid-sized operations company that sounded more impressive than it actually was. Mostly, we handled logistics disasters for companies rich enough to outsource their problems. Inventory tracking, vendor disputes, routing failures, warehouse coordination. Boring to most people. To me, it was a language. At first, I handled cleanup work nobody wanted, correcting shipment data, rebuilding corrupted spreadsheets, fixing routing schedules after managers made promises they couldn't keep. Whenever somebody called out sick, I covered. Whenever a report vanished, I found it. Whenever a vendor threatened to walk, I calmed them down before upper management even heard about it. 3 years later, I wasn't the new girl anymore. I was the person everyone quietly depended on. The glue. And glue never gets promoted. Glue just keeps things from falling apart while somebody else gets credit for building them. My manager, Ken Rivers, loved leadership books the same way people love gym memberships they never use. He kept one open on his desk at all times with a highlighter sticking out of it like a prop. He also wore a Bluetooth earpiece constantly, as if billion-dollar mergers might happen during lunch. Mostly, he disappeared for coffee breaks and meetings with Chase. Chase Rivers. His nephew. The announcement happened during a Monday morning huddle. Ken stood there smiling too hard. "Everyone, this is Chase," he said proudly. "Our new operations intern. He'll be shadowing the team for the next few months." The team became me before noon. Chase was polished, in the way rich boys always are. Expensive watch, perfect haircut, confidence unsupported by experience. He asked questions like, "Can't this entire workflow just be automated?" The workflow involved forklift timing, union schedules, warehouse staffing shortages, and one supervisor in Cleveland who screamed at anyone under 30. After Chase's first week, Ken stopped by my desk. "Suzanne," he said warmly, leaning against the divider, "you've got such a calm presence. Mind mentoring Chase a little? Show him how we do things around here?" Mentoring. Corporate code for do extra work quietly. "You're kind of our rock star," Ken added with a grin. Rock star. That word always showed up right before unpaid labor. Still, I did it. Because at that point, competence had become muscle memory. I taught Chase everything. How to read inventory dashboards. How to spot routing conflicts before trucks got delayed. How to talk to Barry from the Cleveland Depot without getting cursed at. Sometimes Chase paid attention. Most of the time, he talked about innovation strategy while struggling to understand basic shipping reports. A month later, we closed a nightmare logistics project that had been broken for years. I spent weekends untangling corrupted routing data, missed a close friend's engagement party, Worked 14 straight days. During the recap meeting, Ken stood proudly at the front of the room. "I really want to recognize Chase here," he announced. "This project showed real leadership potential." The room clapped. I stared at the conference table so nobody would see my expression. Then Ken looked at me. "And Suzanne," he added casually, "thank you for always being reliable."
Reliable.
That word hit harder than criticism ever could. Reliable was what people called office furniture. Reliable was what people called printers. Reliable was what they called women they depended on, but never intended to elevate. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe recognition would come later. 2 weeks after the project closed, Ken invited me into his office for what he called a career sync. I walked in holding coffee and cautious hope. Ken sat behind his standing desk. Not standing. Scrolling through Slack like it personally offended him. "Suzanne, take a seat." I sat down. He smiled. "You've been doing really incredible work lately. Chase says you've been a huge help." "Thanks," I replied carefully. Then he leaned forward. "I wanted to discuss your future here at Midline." For one humiliating second, my heart actually lifted. Not because I expected miracles, but because after years of carrying half the department, I thought maybe somebody had finally noticed. Ken folded his hands together. "You've become a very dependable part of this company."
Dependable.
Again. "But after discussions with upper management," he continued, "we're not sure leadership is the right track for you." I blinked slowly. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "What?" "You're excellent operationally," he rushed to explain. "Very detail-oriented, extremely valuable execution-wise. But leadership is more about influence, presence, big-picture communication." I just stared at him. I had onboarded entire teams during restructures. I had resolved warehouse conflicts senior management couldn't handle. I had literally built process guides Chase was now presenting like graduate-level research. But apparently, I lacked presence. "So you don't think I have leadership potential?" I said flatly. Ken immediately lifted his hands defensively. No, I didn't say that. I just think maybe right now isn't the right fit." Right now. Corporate language for never. I didn't argue. Didn't mention Chase. Didn't mention the weekends, or the overtime, or the disasters I fixed while management collected bonuses. I simply nodded once. "Understood." Ken relaxed instantly, mistaking silence for agreement. "You're still a rock star, Suzanne. We honestly couldn't function without you." That sentence settled something cold inside me. They couldn't function without me. But they still didn't respect me enough to let me lead. I stood up slowly. "Thanks for the clarity." He smiled proudly, like he had handled the conversation perfectly. I walked out quietly, closed the office door, returned to my desk, opened a blank document, and typed 2 words. "I'm done." That night, I updated my resume. No dramatic speech. No angry LinkedIn post. Just facts. The next morning, I submitted my 2 weeks' notice. Ken called me emotional during the exit interview. Said I wasn't open to constructive feedback. Then offered me a retention bonus with the same rehearsed smile he used whenever he needed something from me. I declined without hesitation. Because staying would not have been loyalty. It would have been surrender. So I walked out of Midline Solutions carrying 1 cardboard box and a quiet fury I didn't fully understand yet. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the fear and humiliation, another feeling started growing.
Relief.
Because for the first time in years, I stopped begging people to see my value. Quitting midline did not feel empowering. It felt like nausea. Like staring at my apartment ceiling at 2 in the morning, wondering whether I had just destroyed the only stable thing in my life because my pride got hurt. I didn't have some glamorous backup plan. No startup idea. No rich boyfriend waiting to tell me to follow my dreams. Just $4,300 in savings, an aging laptop that overheated every time I opened more than 4 tabs, and a resume full of jobs nobody outside operations cared about. The first week after leaving, my body still woke up at 5:30 automatically. Panic had become routine. I started freelancing almost immediately because I couldn't afford not to. Warehouse audits. Routing cleanups. Inventory corrections for companies still using software that looked older than I was. One client paid me partially in restaurant gift cards. Another forgot to pay me entirely until I called 3 times. I worked from coffee shops with uncomfortable chairs designed to force people out after 30 minutes. From diners that smelled like burned bacon. From my car when library Wi-Fi failed. Some days I spent 12 hours working just to earn enough for groceries and rent. But something strange happened during those months. For the first time in years, every solution belonged to me. Not Ken. Not Chase. Me. And once I stopped wasting energy trying to prove myself to people determined not to value me, I started noticing things faster than ever. Broken vendor systems. Duplicate invoicing. Routing structures held together by spreadsheets named things like final_V7_real_use this one. I fixed problems almost compulsively. Not because clients paid extra, because I genuinely couldn't leave broken systems alone. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, while eating a stale blueberry muffin in my car after a warehouse consultation, my phone rang.
Unknown number.
Normally, I ignored those. Something made me answer. Hello? Hi, is this Suzanne Newton? Depends, I replied cautiously. Are you trying to sell me solar panels? A woman laughed softly on the other end. Real human, I promise. Rachel Nunez, Director of Operations at Creighton and Partners. I sat up straighter immediately. Creighton was big. Bigger than Midline ever dreamed of becoming. Rachel continued. Your name came up during a vendor review. Apparently, you helped redesign an entire warehouse routing system for one of our suppliers. Oh, I said slowly. That project. I had done it for a family friend. She paid me in installments and homemade lasagna. They said you solved problems our own consultants missed, Rachel said. We'd like to bring you in on contract for an audit. That was how everything changed. Not with triumph. Not with revenge. With a back door quietly opening. The first time I walked into Creighton's office, I nearly turned around in the lobby. Glass walls.
Modern lighting.
People who looked expensive even when carrying coffee. I wore a navy blouse that suddenly felt cheap under professional lighting. Rachel met me herself. Mid-30s. Sharp eyes, calm energy. The kind of woman who didn't need to announce authority because the room already adjusted around her naturally. You ready? She asked. No, I admitted honestly. She smiled. Good. Confident people usually miss things. That sentence stayed with me. The meeting itself felt brutal. Executives firing questions. Warehouse reports spread across giant monitors. Deadlines. Costs. Delays. But unlike Midline, nobody interrupted me when I spoke. Nobody smiled politely while waiting for a man to repeat my point louder. Rachel listened carefully. And when I identified 3 routing failures in under 20 minutes, she didn't look surprised. She looked interested. That was new. The project lasted 6 weeks. Then they extended me for another. Then another. Within 6 months, I wasn't freelance anymore. I was officially part of Creighton and Partners. Senior Process Analyst. The title sounded vaguely made up, but it came with decision-making authority, healthcare, and an actual parking pass, so I loved it immediately. More importantly, it came with something Midline never gave me: trust. I built systems, led meetings, managed rollout strategies. People asked for my opinion and then actually listened to the answer. For the first time in my career, leadership stopped feeling like a locked door. It felt like something I had already been doing all along. One morning during a weekly review, Rachel slid a folder across the conference table. "New client," she said casually. "Needs a full operational overhaul." I opened the folder, then froze. Midline Solutions. My old company. My stomach tightened instantly. Rachel studied my face carefully. "You know them?" "I used to work there." "Interesting," she said calmly. "Then you probably already understand the problems." That almost made me laugh. I understood the problems intimately. I used to stay late fixing them, while management congratulated each other for surviving crises they created. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "I want you leading this one." I looked up sharply. "Me?" "You rebuilt 3 warehouse systems in under a year," she said. "You lead teams well. Clients trust you. My analysts trust you. Why wouldn't it be you?" The question hit harder than she realized. Because for years I had been trained to believe leadership belonged to louder people. People like Ken. People like Chase. Not women who quietly held collapsing systems together while everyone else took credit. Rachel must have noticed something shift in my expression because her voice softened slightly. "Suzanne," she said, "you already lead. Titles just caught up." I looked back down at the midline file. The irony almost hurt. The company that told me I lacked leadership skills now needed my help to survive. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt strangely calm, like something unfinished was finally circling back toward me. "I'll take it," I said. Rachel nodded immediately. "Good," she replied, "because I already put your name on the proposal." The week before the kickoff meeting felt surreal. Not scary exactly, just heavy. Like every hallway memory from Midline had suddenly started replaying in my head. The late nights, the ignored suggestions. Ken smiling while handing Chase another opportunity I had quietly earned. Except now, things were different. I had a team. 3 analysts. 1 project coordinator. A junior associate named Mason who accidentally sent me a Slack message that was supposed to go to another analyst. It read, "Suzanne somehow makes spreadsheets sound threatening." I promoted him to favorite employee immediately. I also had confidence now. Not fake confidence. Not the exhausted performance version. Real confidence. The kind built slowly through competence and survival. The morning of the midline kickoff, I stood in front of my apartment mirror adjusting my blazer, while my boyfriend Daniel leaned against the kitchen doorway drinking coffee. "You're thinking too much," he said. "I'm not nervous." "You reorganized the spice rack alphabetically at midnight." I glanced toward the kitchen. That was unrelated. Daniel laughed softly and walked over. He straightened my collar gently. "You already survived them once," he said quietly. "Now they're hiring you to fix what they broke." I looked at him for a second, then exhaled slowly. He kissed my forehead once. "Go scare them professionally." By the time I arrived at Midline's new office with my team, My heartbeat had steadied again. Glass walls.
Corporate slogans.
Artificial confidence built into the architecture. Some things never changed. The receptionist handed us visitor badges with a polished smile. Then she led us toward a conference room called Synergy. Of course, it was called Synergy. I stepped inside first. And the very first person I saw was Chase. He froze mid-conversation, coffee halfway to his mouth. For 2 full seconds, he just stared at me. Then his entire expression changed. "Suzanne?" I smiled politely. "Hi, Chase." His eyes dropped immediately to the Creighton logo on my folder, then back to me. "You're leading this?" "Yes," I answered calmly. "My team will oversee the operational restructure." He looked like someone had quietly informed him the floor was unstable. And then, 3 minutes later, Ken Rivers walked into the room. Ken didn't recognize me immediately. Then he did. And the confidence drained from his face so fast, it almost looked painful. "Suzanne," he said carefully, forcing a smile. "Wow, Creighton, huh?" I stood and shook his hand politely. "Been there about a year," I replied. "Great company, smart leadership." The meeting started. I walked midline through every operational failure my team had uncovered. Delayed routing systems, broken reporting structures, vendor losses, departments working against each other because nobody actually owned the processes anymore. I stayed calm the entire time.
Professional. Precise.
That somehow made it worse for them, because every slide quietly exposed the truth. The woman they once dismissed understood their business better than the people running it. Chase barely spoke. Ken kept interrupting, trying to soften the numbers, redirect blame, explain away problems that had already been documented. Rachel shut him down twice. By week 3, midline was spiraling internally. Staff turnover. Missed deadlines. Contracts at risk. And every fix my team implemented made one thing painfully obvious. Most of the company's problems had never been operational. They were leadership problems. One afternoon after a review meeting, Chase stopped me near the elevators. "You deserved better here," he admitted quietly. I looked at him for a moment. "I know," I said gently. That answer seemed to hit him harder than anger would have. A week later, the email arrived. Effective immediately, Kenneth Rivers is no longer with Midline Solutions. No dramatic goodbye. No celebration. Just one sentence quietly ending years of damage. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. Not because I felt victorious, because I finally realized I had spent years trying to earn approval from people who were never qualified to judge me in the first place. That night, my team dragged me out for tacos and cheap margaritas. Halfway through dinner, Priya raised her glass. "Serious question," she said. "What actually makes someone a good leader?" The table went quiet. I thought about Ken. About midline. About the version of myself who used to stay late, hoping hard work alone would finally matter. Then I answered honestly. A good leader remembers what it felt like to be ignored. Nobody spoke for a second. Then Mason nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's the difference." Later that night, I walked back into the office alone to grab my laptop. The building was quiet. Peaceful. I passed the conference room windows and caught my reflection briefly in the glass. For years, I thought confidence would feel loud once I finally earned it. Instead, it felt calm.
Steady.
Like no longer asking permission to take up space. I smiled faintly to myself, turned off the office lights, and walked out knowing something had finally changed forever. Not because Midline lost Ken. Because I stopped needing people like him to tell me who I was.